So if you just move to the US, the first thing to know is that nothing happens to your UK pensions. They remain exactly as they are, they remain invested, they remain with your existing provider, the money's still there and you don't need to worry about anything. So it's the first thing you need to understand. Nothing will change in the short term. The only thing we'd suggest doing is informing your provider that you've moved and give them your new address and let them know that you've moved to another country. The simple answer to this question is looking at where UK and US pensions are invested and how their respective markets have done. So for example, if you look at the average UK pension, you're typically seeing between 30 and 70% of UK equity exposure. And not just equity exposure, but also looking at government bonds and corporate bonds, etc. So UK pensions are typically very heavily weighted to the UK markets. The same logic is applied to the US. So in the US, the vast majority of IRA accounts and 401k accounts are invested in the S&P 500, for example. Now, the reason why the UK has underperformed the US is because in the last 10 years, the performance of the S&P has been drastically greater than the FTSE 100. The reason being is that the FTSE, for example, is full of traditional stocks, it's full of energy stocks, fossil fuels, arms, etc. And it doesn't have a lot of exposure to technology. So only 2% of the FTSE 100 constitutes what we would traditionally call a technology growth stock. Whereas if you look at the US, you have companies like Tesla, Apple, Alphabet, Meta, etc., all of which have grown extraordinary amounts in the last few years. And on that basis, the average US retirement account has grown at a much faster rate than a UK pension. So when we're looking at maximising our UK benefits as a US resident, there's two things we need to be looking at. The first, the most obvious one, is obviously the underlying investments. So what is my pension invested in? What do the investments mean for me and my attitude to risk? And what reward am I likely to get for that risk? So with most UK pension providers, and we talk about Aviva, Scottish Widows, Standard Life, you're typically invested in a one-size-fits-all solution based on your age. So for example, if you're close to retirement, you'll likely be in a cautious portfolio, and if you're a bit younger, it should be more heavily weighted towards equities and a bit more adventurous. After looking at the investments, we suggest looking at the fee structure. So how much does my pension cost? Am I getting value for money? Or am I receiving advice for this? Because most of these UK pensions, as we've said before, are off-the-shelf solutions. They're not tailored or bespoke to you. So it's important you understand what value for money you're getting, if any, from that pension account. So UK pensions in the US are taxed at your marginal rate of income tax. So for example, if you earn $100,000 in the US already and you take a £50,000 payment from a UK pension, you'll have to speak to your tax advisor or self-declare yourself and essentially add this onto the income tax that you're paying. Now importantly, there is a dual taxation agreement between the UK and the US. What that means is you'll never have to pay tax in both countries, which is really important to know. So for example, if you live in the US, you can elect to pay your tax in the UK to HMRC. Alternatively, you can apply for what's called an NT code, which essentially informs HMRC that you no longer live in the country, that you don't want tax deducted at source in your pensions, and then in that scenario, you would just declare the income in the US, subject to your marginal federal income tax rate. So I think the most important fact to consider is, do you really need to transfer? And the answer to this depends on your existing provider. So, for example, if they're prepared to offer you a wide investment choice, if they're prepared to offer you multi-currency investment options, and if they're prepared to pay you as and when you want your pension income as a US resident, in reality there's no need to transfer, unless obviously you really feel the need for a financial advisor to advise you on your investments if you're uncomfortable with doing so. But if none of those benefits are applicable to you as a US resident, we strongly consider engaging with a regulated advisor to understand your options and to understand how your pension can be maximised and fit within your new life and retirement abroad in the US.